good, bitches? I am the almighty fucking master creature. I found my gogs, thank Cthulhu. They were hiding behind a stack of VHS tapes on my shelf. I couldn't be more fucking retarded. I'm not letting these things out of my sight anymore. Not even Cthulhu could take them away from me. As you can see, I pierced my septum. Fuck with it, bitch. Before I get into the topic, I want to express my regards for Spike and Heather. I'm really happy that you guys are finally together. You both have the master creature's blessing. So, immortality. My thoughts. Immortality. Why was that necessary? Could it ever be achievable in human biology? Could modern day science ever grant immortality to humans? Doubtful. We are life forms, and life forms have a beginning. If you have a beginning, you have to have an end. There is no such thing as a beginning with no end. It's what we call being finite. Human life is finite. We are born, and therefore we will meet demise. It is inevitable. Nothing that is born ever lives forever. The only way something cannot be destroyed is if it were never created. Also, immortality just begs way too many damn questions. If you're immortal, what would happen if someone cut your head off? Would the head still speak? What if you cut the head off and incinerated it? Would you still be walking around with no head? If so, how could you even think? Immortality seems to be the indication that your organs would be virtually meaningless. Could you still think even if someone extracted your brain? You'd have a beating heart, but if somebody pulled your heart out of your body, would you still be walking around? Would you have a beating heart in the first place? If it was beating, how could there be a difference in your consciousness if your heart all of a sudden stopped beating? I mean, you're immortal, right? I mean, if your heart stopped beating, you'd still be walking around. You'd still be dwelling on the face of the earth. What would be the significance of a beating heart if nothing would happen if it stopped? If you were walking around with a heart in your chest that was not beating, why the fuck would it be there in the first place? And what would be the point of having lungs for that matter? If you had lungs and were able to breathe air, what would happen if somebody, for the sake of argument, penetrated your chest with their fist and tore out both of your lungs? Since you're immortal, you'd still be alive, but how would you breathe air? If you could be alive without breathing air, what would be the point of having lungs in the first place? What biological purpose would your lungs serve if they existed inside your chest? If someone ripped out every organ in your body, would you still be alive? If someone torched you with a fucking flamethrower and you were nothing but ashes, would you still be alive? I mean, you're immortal, right? It seems so logically unsound to be immortal. If you're immortal, does that mean you have an indestructible anatomy and nobody can ever damage or remove your organs? If so, what happens when the earth ends? Indestructible lungs, but what happens when the earth ends and there is no oxygen left for you to breathe? You'd have indestructible lungs, but could they still function without oxygen? If not, what biological purpose would they serve? It seems so logically impossible to even consider immortality in any functional sense. Okay, so let's say that you do have an indestructible anatomy and you can survive in space without breathing when the world ends. What the fuck are you going to do then? You're going to essentially be floating around in the emptiness of space for millions of years with nowhere to go because there isn't a planet with life or civilization around for light years. If you're immortal, you're going to be waiting for the world to come to its destruction, and when that happens, you're fucked. What are you going to do as you float around in space until you happen to land on a place that's solid enough to inhabit? Even if you do happen to land on a solid, inhabitable rock in space, what are you going to do? You're going to be conscious, and you're going to have nothing to fucking do. You will have no conceivable fucking purpose, and you can't die because you're immortal. You're going to be in a sad, miserable prison of eternal consciousness with nothing but meaninglessness and despair. And I don't want to wait for that shit to happen. Despite how logically incoherent and biologically absurd immortality is, I have absolutely nothing to gain by obtaining immortality but an inevitable eternity in misery and nothingness. Fuck that. People who go around thinking how cool it would be to have immortality really don't analyze this shit. I don't like the idea of eternity. That's why I can't feel comfortable believing in shit like heaven and hell. I don't want to be conscious for eternity. Sure, you may be happy living in heaven, but for eternity? Not a year, not 100 years, not 1,000,000,000,000 years, but fucking eternity. What are you gonna do by being happy for fucking eternity? Fuck eternity. I like human life. I like finite life. I like having a beginning and an end. It's what makes life special. It's what makes life valuable. What am I gonna do if I'm on this planet for 5,000 years? Yeah, it's my 5,000th birthday. Yeah, 5,000 years on this planet. Can't wait for my 10,000th birthday. And how do you age if you're immortal? How do you look if you're 10 fucking thousand years old? Do you pick your own look? Do you choose whether you look 18 or 25 or 30 or whatever? Do you or can you change your own exterior in regards to its apparent age? If you're immortal, how do you get from being an infant to any other growth? If you're immortal, how do you get from being an infant to any other age? I mean, it's not about just looking your age, it's about growth. We go from being an infant to an adult because of the anatomical growth that age gives us. Our bones get fucking bigger. So are we born immortal or what? If we are born immortal, how can we grow from being an infant to an adult to some random time where we stop growing? I assume if we ever implement immortality, we have to first be mortal and then make ourselves immortal by some artificial means. Like if you made someone immortal as an infant, he or she would just stay an infant forever because you'd stop the decaying of age. But if you stop the decaying of age, you stop the growing of age because they're two sides of the same coin. First you grow and then you decay, and that's all part of being finite and having an inevitable death. Or would you just find a way to stop the decay entirely? Like you make someone immortal as an infant, and he grows to be an adult or something, and then he stops at the age where he would start decaying, because if being immortal means you stop aging at all whatsoever, if someone is born immortal, he or she would basically stay an infant for eternity and never be able to speak. Or would this infant somehow have the capacity to learn how to speak and think and communicate like Stewie from Family Guy? If you could make someone immortal by artificial means, what happens if you make someone immortal on his or her deathbed? What if this person was 100 years old and was about to die, and you made him or her immortal? Would he be walking around as a 100-year-old debilitated human being for all eternity? If you're immortal, does that mean you can feel pain? Like if someone ripped out your heart, would you still feel it and not die? You'd basically be in pain for an excessive amount of time. You'd feel excruciating levels of pain, and there'd be nothing you could do about it. If you feel yourself getting decapitated and lived with no head, how the fuck could you stop the pain and repair the head to the body? Or can you not feel pain? So if you had a tapeworm growing inside your stomach and it grew to fill your entire intestines, would you have any awareness of it whatsoever? What about pleasure? Pleasure and pain are two sides of the same coin. They're opposites. You can't have one opposite without another opposite, because an opposite has to oppose something. How could immortality somehow transfigure the nervous system so that you can only feel pleasure without pain? There are just too many fucking questions. Immortality makes absolutely no sense to me. It's irrational, illogical, and fucking intangible. As far as I see it, there's no way to make it work. And even if it were biologically possible, I don't want to fucking be immortal. I like mortality. As I said, I love life because I know I will die. How could you possibly have gratitude for what you have if you thought you'd have it forever? I'm grateful for life because I know there will be a time when I don't have it. I cherish my memories because I know I won't have them forever. One day, all of my memories will vanish into the darkness of oblivion. How can I cherish a memory, knowing it will always be in my cognizance? With immortality, how does shit stay valuable and not get fucking boring? Life would be meaningless without death. The whole point of life is to cherish it, and you'd have no will to cherish what you have if it's eternal. Infinite life is of finite value, and a finite life is of infinite value. I am the Dark Lord Master Creature. Stick to your guns, light your own path, and biohazard for fucking life. Much biohazardous clown love, fam. Congratulations to Spike and Heather.